Welcome to Inside Human Capital, presented by Connex Partners and Sabretooth.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the C-Suite Edge Inside Human Capital. I'm your host, John Light. I'm also the CEO of Sabretooth Recruiting, and part of what comes with that is this opportunity to rub shoulders, even virtually, with some amazing people in the human capital space. And today I'm fortunate to have with me Estrella Parker, the very recently retired CHRO of Cupertino Electric. Thanks so much for joining me today, Estrella.
Hi, John. My pleasure.
So I thought it might be cool to start off with getting an overview of you and your background, because I think it's very interesting. You've done some really eclectic things in the human capital space amongst industry sectors and whatnot. I was hoping maybe you could share a little bit of that background with us as we get started.
Yes, I think of myself really as a business transformation executive. And most recently, probably in the last decade, really in the role of a chief people officer or CHRO. And in the space of my career, I've worked with a lot of different industries and a lot of different business challenges, whether it's shifting the business model or also taking advantage of new waves of technology or just things just like at Cupertino, it was really about hitting the growth button in an organization that is scaling from mid to large.
And that growth button can be a challenge, especially these days where technology just seems to, the foundation under your feet seems to shift every 6 or 8 months. And I know one of the areas we wanted to talk about is when we look at things like technology adaptation, a lot of companies that I see out there, I think, are trying to leave people behind. And I think our philosophy, mine and yours, probably align very closely in that it needs to be more human centered, that it needs to be anchored in the human experience, not just for employees, but really for customers and clients, for vendors, for everybody in the chain. And so I'm curious if you could take a minute and kind of take my rambling, if you will, around the topic and coalesce that into where you have found the rubber meeting the road when it comes to human-centric technology adaptation.
Yeah, I would say that my work has really primarily been around human-centric change.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly having had my career in the last 3 decades really be centered around different waves of technology coming on board and also different generational values
Yeah.
um, coming on board and taking a look at, how do you, as a responsible capital-based organization, and I have worked also for mission-based organization,
Mm-hmm.
um, take the kind of responsibility of creating change that is good for all, good for the business,
Mm-hmm.
good for the people who work in the business, good for your customers, and good for the long term of
Mm-hmm.
society. And so I personally, in my journey, in my career, have gravitated to those kinds of companies that have a deeper sense of responsibility, which allows me to do that kind of work. You get the right kind of support, you get the right kind of focus. And in the end, my observation has been that when you do it that way, you can actually uh, leverage and achieve more. Because not only are you achieving, say, some level of efficiency or some level of scale that you're trying to achieve, but it sticks. Because at the end of the day, all of the things that we're creating are run by or consumed by human beings in the end. And so if you don't consider that more in the inner circle of how you're architecting your change or your
Right.
policies or your decisions, then, it's very short term, or honestly, it's also risky.
When we see a lot of that going about, I think one of the more popular hashtags you see out on social media sites is the hashtag future of work.
Hmm.
And we sit back and look at this, and I don't know that there are a lot of people who look at that, I think, and they don't necessarily have clarity on what they think that's going to look like 6 months from now, 12 months from now, a year from now, a decade from now. And I wonder sometimes if the answer is more simple than we allow it to be, because at the end, people do business with people. People hire people. People work for people. What's the adage that gets thrown around on LinkedIn all the time? People don't leave companies, they leave managers. Look, there's a lot of truth
Right,
to that. There's a lot of truth. I,
right.
I can think of times when people have left companies because there are reasons for it, but by and large, it's there's not alignment and leadership and who you report to. Somewhere in that chain that runs some people off, some good talent off. And I'm really curious when you see this happening, are we making it too complicated? When it comes to how do we keep humans being more human without detract using technology in a way that detracts from that?
Yeah, I think, what's a little scary right now is the talk about AI
Hmm.
and how fast, really, the technology can take over, all those things that we as human beings have been involved in.
Hmm.
So to me, and maybe it's because my last decade has really been at the C-level position, that it's really important for people in those roles to think through how within their community of people that and customers that they're
Hmm.
responsible for, as well as the 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 taking care of the business, you have to think about how your ecosystem um, can you need to double down
Hmm.
really as an executive on ethics and what you stand for, uh, because it's fast. So as C-level people, you're
Hmm.
setting the strategy, you
Hmm.
are setting the focus for how you're going to embrace this technology or disseminate it, right? So you have to be very centric on what your business is about. And I've always said to many, like, it's not about AI, it's about your business.
Hmm.
So AI is happening, but you have to understand what you're trying to do in your business so that then you can say, well, what is AI's part in that? And how can we be better in everything that we stand for, right? Whether it is growing our business, serving the customer so that it will be a better product or a service that you have. And so some of those truths to me have always been there,
Right.
and the companies that last and the companies that reinvent themselves appropriately and the companies that are celebrated
Hmm.
are the ones who really think through that and orchestrate, their changes, their implementations, their investments in that way.
Interesting. Can I steal this quote? Not about AI. It's about your business.
Yeah.
Because we could modify that a little bit and say it's not about the technology, it's about the people.
And it's both, right?
Yes.
I've only worked for companies that have been people centric again in the last decade. And so it's been really sweet, sweet, sweet for me to be CHRO or CPO, because in that business, that role is seen as critical because they also see their business as a people centric business.
Hmm.
Therefore, all of our decisions have been made around what is good for the people and the company, because we understand that dynamic of the connection between our people driving our business.
Do you think Do you think that there are a lot of leaders, executive leaders, okay, let's, up the food chain, whether it's in a small early stage company or a large established Fortune 500 or 1,000 or
Mhm.
whatever. Do you think that within the echo chamber that sometimes occurs in boardrooms and in C-suites, do you think that there is a tendency, even at that level, to get caught up in the hype that's in the market? For example, everything that Anthropic drops, man, right before it drops, oh, it's the end of the world. We're replacing accountants. Oh, you know what? We're replacing your grandmothers now. I mean, it's like they go down this whole thing and it's like fear, 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 concern, concern, concern. Oh, here's this mythos or whatever that one drop they did and they pulled it back because it's probably too dangerous for security purposes. Um, do you think that C-suite is buying into that and being influenced by that when it comes to these decisions where they are letting large swaths of people go and saying it's because we've implemented agentic
You
AI?
know, I think that is the hype. And
Mhm,
that is sometimes the problem with hype. It's like it's not representative of the reality of the thousands
mhm,
of businesses and the thousands of organizations that are thinking about this and thinking about it differently, perhaps, in the lens that they have. If you already feel like your business is threatened
mhm,
by efficiency, then of course you're going to look for efficiencies in that way, right? Like to me, that would be smart to do that because if it affords that for you, then that's fine. If it's not, like as an example at Cupertino, you know, where AI is, it's not front and center to actual building. Not yet. So we're also not in a rush. We were not in a rush. We wanted to think about governance of how we actually leverage
mhm,
data to do better things and to be faster. There's a demand for workers in that arena, so it's
mhm.
really not about getting rid of workers, it's about augmenting what the workers can do so that we can do things faster or better, right?
That's exactly what it ought to be about right there. How do we help us be better in our
Mhm.
capacity and our strengths as human beings?
Right. And research after research is showing that the best outcomes are when people and AI work together,
Mhm,
not when AI works by itself, or also not when people work by themselves. Because, AI allows that access to knowledge, right? And knowledge that you can create with, that you can converse with easily. And so when time is of the essence, like sometimes saving lives, right? It helps, right? Because you're shortening the amount of time to get to the right answer.
what do you
And so you
think?
do that responsibly. Some things are not good when you shorten it.
Yeah, and, I have a question on the tip of my tongue, but you've brought up something that I haven't heard from a lot of people when I've recorded episodes. I have heard it outside of the episodes, and that's this idea of governance. Having limits around AI and how it works, what it does. In my mind, AI, all right, can I use a football analogy? Sorry, it's what pops in my head. But AI should help you get to the point of a decision, maybe to like the 5-yard line. And then the rest of it, there's judgment, there's variables that you aren't measurable. They're very subjective. They're based on life experience. They're based on other areas of knowledge that may come to your head as want to happen. I wonder sometimes if we're not having enough conversations around governance controls, things of that nature, relative to AI, so that there is, I don't know if standard's the right word, Australia. Maybe if there are, but let's just use it anyways. Maybe there are certain standards of how you implement these things so as to maximize the efficacy alongside of human
Right.
beings.
Standards and norms. And what's hard about AI too is that if you are not wise, if you are not experienced,
Hmm.
AI can drive you and
Hmm.
drive your work, which is why, structurally and architecturally, also for the technology, it's important to understand who's consuming your AI and to
Hmm.
build for that, right? Because you can have policies. So, some of these old ways, and, this is the part that I regret I'm not there anymore to innovate the thinking around some of this. Governance, the way we think about it, also has to change. Like, I've thought often about culture and how culture, because that's something we as human capital leaders, architect,
Hmm.
is really the best way to govern. So, how do you drive the right kind of culture in your organization so that people are uh, utilizing AI appropriately and in alignment to how your organization sees its fit and how it's being used? So, governance is important as kind of part of that ecosystem, and that's where many of us have to play when something new is coming, when a shift is about to happen, when change is about to happen, because you have to direct that. So, so yes, governance is really important. And when I left Cupertino just a couple of weeks ago, that was still front and center really for what the executive team was looking at and working
Hmm.
on.
It's it's striking to me because things in around the AI space happen so fast. It's like we used to use. Well, you used each generation of processor and each generation of software to build the next. And you kept coming
Mhm.
and coming. Now it's going really, really fast, and literally it's building itself. Are we providing enough guidance and guardrails and all that? I think it's a very relevant conversation, especially for established organizations that have millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions even invested into their existing systems, processes, data.
Mhm.
I think there are a lot of major decisions coming up. And one of the questions I had for you coming into this is whether it's a mission centric or human centric, whatever centric organization is, whatever its orientation relative to that, what do you see is the biggest hurdle they're facing with the technology creating this kind of tumultuous marketplace
Hmm.
from a human capital point of view?
I think, it's not one answer. I'm
Hmm.
sorry to disappoint you, John. It's not one answer because every business is really different. Like, I'm thinking about Cupertino, which
Uh-huh.
its challenge is like it has such a huge market it can't address. So it's not necessarily competition. And then there are several
Hmm.
other sectors of the economy that it's more competition,
Yeah, very
right? So
commoditized, like my sector.
right. So
Yeah.
you have to think about how can I create competitive advantage by leveraging this technology. And then I was just in and this was actually more a social art event with women founders. And I was talking to different women founders, and actually, the guest speaker in their panel was the head of Anthropic's group that works with organizations to use Anthropic, right, and build. It's also very exciting because a lot of these women founders have great ideas and great problems that they want to solve and want to address in the marketplace. And now having these tools helps them get to market faster.
Yeah. It's
So,
lowered a
and
barrier of
scale
entry.
faster. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not doom and gloom.
Hmm.
And I guess to me, at the end of the day, it's how human can we be? How, uh, and how I guess important it is for us to think about who are we doing this for and why, and build to help human beings in their future of work or in the society or in, creating better lives, really.
No, I
And
think
organizations that are um, uber capitalistic,
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones I'm afraid of.
Yeah, where it's what's the almighty dollar say?
Yes.
But I think that's a good, well-rounded, and well-thought-out answer because, ultimately, the companies that chase dollars live by the sword, die by the sword, so to speak. If that's all you're doing, even in capital markets, investors like PE firms and VC firms, there's that area between the two that's traditionally been there, like you're this and you're that, you're buy versus build effectively. That's fading. That's going away. And right now, I've got a piece of paper over here in my notebook, somewhere in my notebook, with names of people who are building companies, and some of which will end up with 100 million plus in revenue, fewer than 5 people. One's got
Right?
2. One's got 2.
Exactly.
That's it. And
Exactly.
I think there's a massive incoming tidal wave of entrepreneurialism and opportunity. Call it the gold rush, call it whatever you want. But I like where I think I understand part of where you're going is. There's a book I read years ago, a little skinny book, thankfully, called Acres of Diamonds. And a lot of
Hmm.
people don't think of this book. It's an older book, but it's a story about this farmer somewhere in the southern part of Africa. And there was a big rush in Africa. People were going out prospecting for diamonds and rubies and emeralds and all this. And there's nothing he wanted more than to get away from this farm. So he sold the family farm and went out prospecting. And a few years later, he was broke, stone cold broke, died broke. All right, died in debt. The people who bought his farm were plowing up a field. And as the book says it, as I recall correctly, they hit a rock and they're like, what in the world? Turned out to be the Hope Diamond. And the idea is that there's so much opportunity that was at the feet of this guy, and he never recognized it. And I think it's important for companies and individuals to recognize this amazing opportunity, not to industrialize bad processes, but to improve them, to find problems and fix them that companies before are like, oh, we'll tolerate that. Well, now if you have domain knowledge, specific domain knowledge, your ability to go from A to Z and solve that problem and create value has improved tremendously. And all around that, I think whether an organization or individual, to your point, we got to think about governance. We got to think about parameters, and we got to think about anchoring that human experience. Who are we doing it for? I think it's a great question.
Right. Because as a CHRO, and I've seen the leaders, my colleagues that I've worked with on this, we are not afraid to slow things down
Mm-hmm.
if it hurts our people.
Good. I like that answer. I like that statement.
Because the AI is just forcing us to be faster and faster. And honestly, I'm the same. Like, if I have to put together a presentation,
Mm-hmm.
right? I know I can do it fast with AI, but I still give myself that much time because what I can do is sit and interact with AI for a bit and then go and reflect and really think about what am I saying?
Yeah, same.
And then I can, interact again faster. And I'm not stuck, like trying to make my presentation pretty and all of that. Right? Like, so now my use of time is really good. Right? It's really focused on what is the value add of what am I doing this presentation for?
Yeah, no, that's
But I'm
important.
not saying I'm going to do it in 10 minutes only.
Yeah. Well, and don't make the mistake that I know someone who made the mistake and asked for them to make your presentation pretty to make it like, Picasso pretty, because that doesn't end well for your presentation.
Hmm.
Um, or what's the guy's name who used to, Pollock, don't Pollock my presentation. Let me ask you this, Estrella, if somebody wanted to reach out, connect with you and dive a little bit deeper, because I think you are on the exact right track when it comes to how do we adopt technology and still put human beings first, if you will, prioritize that. What's the best way for someone to do that?
Oh, it's the way we all connect with each other in this world, which is LinkedIn. Just find me there. It's Estrella Parker, Estrella, last name Parker.
Yeah, and we're connected too, so if you can find me, you can find her. Estrella Parker, thanks so much for joining me today on the C-Suite Edge Inside Human Capital.
Thank you for listening to Inside Human Capital, presented by Connex Partners and Sabertooth.